To be clear, when I meet somebody, I don't initially tell them that I'm trans. Even when I know someone is interested in me, I don't initially tell them that I'm trans. When I establish a mutual thing, that's generally when I tell them that I'm transgender, you know. And another layer that I didn't mention is that going into these trans spaces, it was also weird because people didn't, a lot of men thought I was just a cis girl that was hanging out at the trans club. And because of that, they weren't very interested in me. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for another episode of True Tea. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me for this video. I really appreciate the fact that you guys have been really leaving some fun and interesting comments on all these videos. I really just genuinely from the bottom of my heart want to thank all the people who come through every single week with a perspective. You know, a lot of you guys challenge me, a lot of you guys make me think, you know, a lot of you guys drag me and you correct me and you tell me that I'm wrong. And I love that. I really do appreciate it. And I've been learning so much about you guys. You guys have been learning so much about me. And, you know, this channel for me is all about learning, sharing, and growing. And I know that it's been all over the place. My channel's been all over the place. I think like some people watching this video right now might be watching this video after watching the video essay that I just put out about the rebranding of white nationalism. And so they might be kind of like surprised by this sort of content, but I just wanted to thank you for sticking around and for continuing, you know, to stick with me through this video. And if you're new, I think you guys should subscribe. We upload videos here at least every week. That is the only promise that I can make. We upload videos at least a week, every single week here. I think that's repetitive. We upload videos at least once a week on this channel. So hey, join us. We love to learn, share, and grow here. So anyway, we're gonna be having an interesting conversation. One that I do not know where it's going to go. You know, sometimes that's how these things start. So like as usual, I always suggest that you guys go to your kitchen and grab yourself a glass of tea. Personally, I am drinking fermented grape tea. I'm drinking some wine again tonight. I know I should be sober for these videos, but I'm about to go out, obviously, if you can't tell. And, you know, I want to pre-party a little bit. You know, mommy needs her special juice. This is box wine. I recently got a big thing of box wine. I've never drank box wine before, but when I read on the side that it was 32 glasses in one thing, I was like, you know what, for $5, bitch, for $5, look, I'm broke, okay, I'll take it. Anyway, let's take a sip and let's get into this conversation. Let's take a big sip for this. Tastes like box wine. So I wanted to talk to you guys about something that has been on my mind a lot recently. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is because, you know, I know that there are a lot of people out there who share my experiences, but sometimes when I go through certain things, I kind of do feel very alone, you know, and I feel like I'm in this weird, unique, complicated, almost contradictory situation. And I really wanted to sort of share that with you guys because it's been making for some interesting experiences, to say the least. I wanted to talk to you guys about how passing has made dating a little complicated for me. Now, I know that every single video I do on this channel is about dating. I know I keep wanting to make videos with other stuff, and I promise you guys, I do have more things to talk about. But it's just, this is what my life is right now. You know, I'm single in LA, I'm cute. You know, what do you want? I'm dating a lot, and in dating, I've been thinking about a lot of stuff. There's so many conversations within dating. And so, you know, I will be making videos about other things. I don't want True Tea to just be me bitching and moaning about dating, but it is relevant and it has been making me think a lot about myself and different things, right? So yeah, that was the disclaimer. I have to do at least one every True Tea episode. That was the disclaimer for this video. So talking about passing has always been kind of complicated. I mean, you guys know I've been on YouTube since I was 15 years old, which means that I transitioned on YouTube. Now, most of you guys who have been following me, you were not around for that at all. You know, the vast majority of you, I mean, like someone commented on my video the other day, it was like, I've been following you since you were in Orange County. By the time I had gotten to Orange County, I was post-transition. So I had been, you know, that's not when it started, okay? I started, you know, way back in my hometown, and, you know, I was in my room, you know, at home, and I was going through all these things. And, you know, when I had this open dialogue with YouTube early on about, you know, my life and stuff, there wasn't a big, like YouTube wasn't what it was today. It was very small and insular. And, you know, when I started to sort of recognize that I was passing, I brought it to YouTube, and I, you know, would have my very small, you know, group of people who were following me come and sort of share their opinions, right? And I want to make this very clear. Let's like just get this out of the way right up front, just right away. Here, disclaimer number 2. Now, I'm allowing you guys to get some sort of insight into my life and my experiences, right? But I want to make it very clear that I am sharing with you guys. I am definitely at a point in life where I don't really feel the need to like fabricate stories or, you know, tell stories, you know, more fancifully. I understand that everyone's going to have an opinion about my life, but understand that my experiences are my experiences, and that's that, you know. And I'm only bringing that up because a lot of times when I talk about passing, I will inevitably get the comment of, oh, Kat, you know, you look just like a man. You look literally like a man. Like, who would ever know that, you know, who would ever not know that you're trans? Like, you're obviously, you know, a big old tranny, you know, like that's the kind of comment I get when I talk about passing, you know. And I'll get back later to how that comment has made me feel through being on YouTube. But I want to make it clear that even though I got a YouTube channel, even though I'm not an unknown person, right? My experience is that I pass, right? My experience is that most people in most spaces do not know that I am transgender. And that's not something that I, you know, pat myself on the back for. That's not something that I think makes me amazing or whatever. It is just my experience. And I've always had a really hard time talking about that with you guys because I know that talking about the experience of a trans person who passes, especially complaining about the complexities of it, comes off as very privileged. And I want to say upfront that I am very privileged, you know, regardless of what trolls say online about how I look. I know that passing privilege does come with privileges. I know that there are many ways in which my life is easier in some ways because people look at me, assume my gender, and tend to assume correctly. I know that that has made my situation a little easier, right? But I wanted to sort of talk to you guys about a really just interesting, weird sort of thing I'm experiencing right now. So, disclaimer number 2. So, one of the things I've always resented, okay, is the idea that I've always really resented the idea that people know my life story based on facts about me. You know, that means when people assume things about me on the basis of me being a woman, that means when people assume things about me on the basis of me being Black, that means when people assume things about me on the basis of me being trans, right? So inherently, as a person, I've always sort of fought to very individually define myself as somebody who is my own person, right? I don't like having to answer for all of the various stereotypes that are projected onto me, because at the end of the day, those things have nothing to do with me, right? And with that attitude, I've definitely lived in a way where I do not segregate myself to certain places because of who I am, right? So for example, tonight I'm going to, if you can't tell already, I'm going to a goth club, right? I've, in my time, just kind of jumping in and out of different scenes and sort of, you know, figuring out where I fit and things like that. I've recognized that I appreciate a space like a goth club because we're all coming together for, you know, the shared celebration and interest in dark music and, you know, dark fashion. That's kind of what a lot of us are doing, you know. We're there for the music, right? Which means that in that group, you have a bunch of different types of people. You've got your trans people, you've got your queer people, you've got your straight people, you've got your people of color, you know. You've got all different types of people all coming together to celebrate one sort of thing. And so I've never really truly been that into going to a place because it's Black, going to a place because it's trans, going to a place, you know. I've never really been that sort of person, okay? And so that's kind of why some of these conversations have become interesting to me, because I've sort of recognized how much my perspectives and experiences have been affected by me sort of just going through life, not feeling like I need to be pushing myself into one category or another, or one space or another, right? So when I was younger, right, I didn't quite feel this way, you know. I definitely felt this desire to have community, this desire to have camaraderie, this desire to sort of meet other trans people and be around people who like trans people, right? And I'm gonna be kind of vague about this because I don't want the details about this aren't important. If you've been following me for a while, you probably already know about this situation in my life, but I was in a situation where it was pretty common for you to meet men. I was going to these parties and going to these spaces where it's pretty common for you to meet men who were actively interested in transgender women, right? And you know, this was when I was like 18, okay? So I was, you know, early stages of my transition, still sort of trying to find my sense of self, still sort of searching, right? And in that search, I wanted to feel part of a community, right? And so I became part of this community. And even though a lot of aspects of that community were very toxic for me, at the end of the day, where I was at that time, it definitely felt good for me to be around people, right? But in that community, you experience a lot of really interesting things, you know, because it's a space that is dominated by, you know, trans and femme people, and the men who like those people. There's a lot of different little complicated little things that happen. Now, with the scene that I was part of, I would say, and this is another conversation, and I want to make it really clear that I don't think I'm better or worse than anybody. I just want to, there's certain differences, right? Within this scene that I was part of, it was definitely, like if there were 50 people in the room, right? And there, you know, and we could like break it up by who's who. You had, I would say maybe like 30 men who like trans women, right? 30 men. You'd have like 15 people who were anywhere from, you know, cross-dresser to transvestite, you know, just kind of all these different types of people who they weren't this way all of their lives in every space, but they really got excited to come to this space and be that way because that was, it's a haven for them. It is a safe space where they can express themselves and also, you know, be around people who appreciate them, right? And that was kind of the situation, right? And then you had like five people in my room who were probably trans women, right? And there was always this weird, like, competition thing that was always happening between, you know, the various different, you know, trans feminine people, you know. If you got the attention of a man, that meant that you were everything, you know. In the trans community, we say fishy, you know. If a man gave you attention, that meant that you were fishy. And we're not gonna get into colloquialisms and problematic language in this video. Leave a comment about it, I'll approve it, but I'm trying to be real, okay? And in the community, that is what we say. We can criticize the language, but I'm gonna still use it to talk about this topic, so. Anyway, that's what we call it. And so like if a man gave you attention, that really meant something. And when I was younger, and I was so insecure and I didn't really like myself, I really felt like when men gave me attention, that like meant something, you know, a man expressing interest in me, a man expressing attraction to me, that meant that I was a woman. I mean, why would this man, you know, communicate to me that he was interested in me if he didn't think that I was a woman, you know, and so it meant a lot, you know, and as I got a little older, as I grew up, as I started to really see certain things for what it was, I started to recognize, and I know this is gonna be a controversial thing to say, that a lot of men will fuck anything. And so it's really silly to base your worth on what a man wants to fuck, because even though, yes, I do agree that, you know, the idea that men are just always looking da-da-da-da is just not right in this community. These men were thirsty. I mean, you have these guys who would talk about, you know, they only want, you know, the most passable, most feminine, you know, most fishy girl in the room. And that's not who they go after, you know? And that was another thing, is you'd have these men who, you know, on the one hand had all of these high standards for passing and the way that you dress and the way that you did this and we did that, you know, but whether or not they actually felt that way, you know, and for a lot of men who come to these things, a lot of these men, they come wanting to experience something with a transgender woman, you know, they come wanting to have that experience. And so when they walk in the room and the vast majority of the trans feminine people there are not transgender women, I feel like they open their minds up a little bit more and they try to figure out, you know, what they're doing, you know. But anyway, the men who were always in this community were always kind of the same sort of person. They were generally very discreet, generally very down low, generally didn't want anybody to know what they were doing or what their interests were. These were the kind of men who were not comfortable with people knowing that they had an attraction to transgender women, right? And for me personally, at a certain point, that started to become an issue because I started to recognize that I didn't want to have these men give me attention in this one small, shallow space. I wanted somebody who was proud of me in all spaces, who wasn't ashamed to be with me, And so I kind of made a decision, and I can do a whole video about down low men and things like that if you guys want. But I made a decision at a certain point in life that I was not going to deal with those men anymore. I kind of said to myself, if a man can't sit at a bar with me and have a drink, why would I ever give him access to my body? You know what I mean? And so that's kind of what the standard that I set for myself. That's kind of what I said. And then once I set that standard, my relationships and dating became better. And that's eventually when I met my ex and we were in a relationship for 5 years. Now, the reason why this is coming up right now for me in my life is I'm in a new, completely different phase of life, a phase I never thought I would ever be in, because I, in my last relationship, just swore that I was going to be married, just swore that we were going to be monogamous, just swore that that would be my end all be all, right? But now I'm in this completely new situation in life. And a lot of me walking away from the previous community that I was part of really did coincide with my my goal of being stealth, which for those of you guys who don't know what stealth is basically when you live in a way where the people around you do not know that you're transgender, right? And so for me, it was really important for me to reach that. And so part of that for me was distancing myself from that community, right? And so that was sort of my experience, right? And meeting my ex definitely sort of pushed me further and further and further and further and further away from associating with that community or being part of that sort of scene, and just kind of being part of a general, normative, hetero scene, right? And that was kind of just how I was, right? And so now being single again, I'm in this really interesting space where I very solidly feel more comfortable and more at ease at more general types of places. I guess a lot of my gay friends would call them straight clubs and straight bars. My friend and I, we went to this karaoke bar, and she's bi, but definitely is a little bit, she's like 100% way more into women. And we went to this karaoke bar, and it was like a loud, boisterous sort of thing. People were just rah, rah, rahing. And I'm sitting there, got a big old smile on my face. I'm having a great time. And she turns to me and she says, "This is far too heterosexual for me." And that's just but that's the sort of space that I really feel comfortable in. And one thing that's becoming really obvious to me, as when I moved to LA, I've been able to spend more time with some of my LGBT friends. And a lot of those people, a lot of my LGBT friends, they don't go places that aren't LGBT. And that's also made me think about other layers of privilege that I have. I travel a lot. I've never looked into LGBT accommodations. I've never looked into whether or not a place is or isn't accepting of someone like me, because passing has made it so that I just sort of fade away into the background and people don't really think of me as anything other than just a woman and assume that I'm straight and it's correct, And so it's that weird thing where I'm kind of recognizing that I kind of live in a very different way. While yes, I may be transgender, I'm very straight. I call myself tragically heterosexual. Not because being straight is tragic, but because I definitely have I definitely live and maintain a certain space that is definitely, I think, to a lot of my LGBT friends, not nearly as fun, right? So anyway, that's kind of how I live my life, I don't really separate myself, right? And so what that has meant for me being in Los Angeles is that I go out to these different places. I'm an incredibly social person. I have a lot of friends, and inevitably I meet a guy. We flirt, we connect. He asks me out on a date. I may or may not say yes. And then we have to have that interesting thing. Now, the problem that I have obviously in these spaces is that generally speaking, when men flirt with me, when men hit on me, when men ask me out on a date, they generally do not know that I'm transgender, And that has been another source of a lot of anxiety for me, because I'm kind of trying to be social, and then in some of the places I go, they are very geared towards dating. And in some of the spaces I go to, there is sort of the benefit of, you know, we all are connected on, you know, a website that says everything about us. And so I can just give somebody my website thing and they can read that I'm trans there, you know, or I can tell them. And I kind of have a thing, honestly, where because I really don't like people making all these assumptions about me on the basis of me being trans, I tend to not always, like I have this almost automatic like thing that like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it prevents me from always saying that I'm trans. And it's not because I'm ashamed, but it's just because, I mean, you guys have to understand, I transitioned when I was 16, you know, I'm 28 now. I don't really have, it's hard for me to feel like it's a thing that needs to be brought up. You know, I definitely think it's an important discussion to have when we talk about dating and relationships and intimacy. I've said it before, but I do not want to be with a man who doesn't want to be a trans woman. You know, that's not something that excites me. I'm a huge fan of having good sex. So I definitely prefer to be with men who have experience, who definitely know what they want and know what they're doing. I don't like to teach people. I'm a very submissive person sexually. I'm not, you know, if you don't know how to do it, we're not doing it, okay? But anyway, but that's sort of my thing, right? And then of course, when you're in that situation where you're in a more general straight space and you're being hit on by these men, and then you're eventually telling them that you're trans, more often than not, these men have had no experience with transgender women. And I definitely in a place right now, oh, this is a sermon that I can tell another day, where I really don't believe in being with men who don't know what they want. There has never been a time in my life where I have given a man a chance, right? Where I have been patient with him, open-minded with him, and I have allowed him to sort of use me as a figuring out, you know, springboard, and it's ever been beneficial to me. Never, okay? So that being said, I'm definitely not in that space, but at the same time, I do recognize that most men have never had experiences with transgender women. Most men have never been in that situation. Most men just do not know, will never know until they know, you know? And so I've had to sort of be a little bit more delicate. I've had to sort of be a little bit more thoughtful and understand and accept that, you know, if I have that hard standard of I'm only gonna ever be with men who know they like trans women, that's an even smaller pool of people who want to date, right? So I've had to learn to be a little bit patient, right? But to be honest with you guys, this is a really big source of anxiety for me because I don't like, you know, it's really hurtful. It's really painful. And this is something I could talk about in another video maybe, but like, I've been experiencing this thing a lot where men are attracted to me. They love my personality. They love everything about me. They want to be around me. They're eager to spend time around me. You know, they love the little vibe of the connection that we have, but they can't get past the trans thing. And when you're in that situation where you connect with someone so much and you connect with someone so well, but they just can't accept you, it's soul crushing because you see what you could have if you were cis, right? And I'm never gonna be cis, you know? And so it is a little frustrating for me to be in that situation. And it's even more frustrating when I'm in certain spaces that are, you know, more sex positive and more kink centric because you have these people who approach you and they're very excited to talk to you and you know, be a little naughty with you or whatever. But then there's that sort of line that gets drawn up when they know that you're trans. And that has been really hard for me to stomach. And so my reaction to that has been to dip my toes back into these trans spaces. Now, now here's the thing about these trans spaces. You know, I haven't been in them since I was like 21. I'm 28 right now. And I was a very, very different person at 21. You know, 18-year-old me did not know what they wanted, did not like themselves a lot, really had a poor self-image, right? And because of that, allowed themselves to get into a lot of things that were probably not the best for them, okay? And so that's sort of where I started, and that is my memory of the space. And so a lot of my memories of how the girls interacted with each other are very much influenced by that. You know, now I'm 28 years old. I've already proven to myself that I deserve love and respect, that, you know, it is possible for me to maintain a relationship, and that I have more to offer to a man than some discreet, you know, back alley sex, you know. And so I walk into this community with a sense of pride and a sense of self-security, and it's a very different world. It's a very, very different world. The first way in which it's super, super different is a lot of spaces that I frequent are very consent driven, are very consent centric. You know, when I'm at, you know, sort of a naughty, kinky party, right? That's more of a general sort of space of people, which by general, usually very straight, right? It's really understood that you don't just walk up and touch somebody. You know, that's like a really hard line understood thing. You know, men do not just walk up and touch women. That's just not something that is accepted, right? But in these trans spaces, let me tell you, I mean, I walk in and guys are grabbing at I don't even know who the hell you are, sir. Sir, I don't know you. But men are like grabbing onto my arm and shit, and I gotta push people away from me. You know, it's a lot of that energy. And the thing that's so messed up about that is that in that community, a lot of these people, and I know this sounds like shade, but if you're trans, I know you know what I'm talking about. A lot of these people, they are so stuck in this idea that their bodies are what they have to offer, that the sex someone has to offer them is validation, that they are so eager to respond. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, this is gonna sound so mean, but like the quality of men in those spaces, not great. Not saying that there aren't awesome guys in those spaces, but like not great. These are usually men, again, who are discreet, right? Who are, you know, very shifty. You know, often these guys are like married and stuff, you know? But you see these girls like push other girls out of the way just to, you know, make sure that they get the attention. And for a lot of men, especially a lot of straight men, they're never in a situation where they walk in a room and women are just like, you know, that's not the general thing. You know, women, typically cis women, are usually pretty protective of their bodies and therefore aren't going to just throw themselves at any guy who sort of gives them attention. But that's not really the case in these spaces. And so that was really jarring for me to observe, because that's definitely not where I am. You know, I'm not gonna bend over backwards for a guy. It's just not what I'm gonna do, you know? And even at these spaces, like I know this might shock you, but like the girls are so catty. But and yes, cis women are catty with each other. Yes, that's a thing, but it's like a weird, it's a little different, because I definitely, there's another conversation we can have, because one thing I'm noticing with, girl, I'm 28 years old, okay? And one thing I don't believe in doing anymore in life is competing with women for a man. Girl, I'm just so beyond that. I'm just, oof, that's a whole other conversation, because I do experience that energy among, you know, with cis women, you know, when I'm in, you know, a more general sort of space. Like, yes, there sometimes is that vibe. Yes, there sometimes is that, but it's a very different thing with trans women, because it's this like almost degree of rudeness. Like I was just at a thing the other night where I was talking to this guy, and this girl like basically pushes me out of the way and, you know, gives him attention. And because I was definitely being very reserved, because I'm not just gonna like throw myself at a guy just because he's there. You know, he was probably a little bit more excited for the girl who was throwing herself at you know, him than he was with me, and so he went off. But it was like so rude. Like it's a thing that like I wouldn't really experience, you know, in a more heterosexual space, I guess you could say. I mean, or more, I don't even know how to describe. I guess I say heterosexual space isn't the right term, but you know what I mean, like a non-transcentric space. Like that's not really something I would experience, you know. Very, very different. And so just an energy, right? And the few times I've actually connected with a guy in those spaces, we start talking and they're all discreet. And you know, when I was younger and I didn't look as cute as I do now, I think I had a little bit more patience for men who were in that position. I think I had I was a little bit more understanding of men in that position. But now it's like, I know I've said this like 5 times in this video, but like, I'm cute, you know, so, and not just to say I'm cute, but I'm very used to going out, you know, like I'm super used to going to dinner, going to movies, you know, going to events, meeting people's friends. Like I'm used to that. That is my normal. My normal is not being someone's secret plaything. My normal is going out, not being with people that are ashamed with me. I'm a very social person, but like this got me thinking a lot, because I think some of those girls in those spaces, because maybe they're not in the same spaces that I'm in, I think that they accept the discreet guy who's not really wanting to do that. Whereas I've definitely kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm not gonna put up with that, you know? And it made me really think about what reality must be like for people who keep themselves in those spaces, who say that they need to remain in a trans space and not go into a more general space. Like they have this thing that prevents them from actually understanding that they deserve to also be treated with respect and taken out if that's what they want, you know? Because, you know, when I was younger, I would often go to these trans parties thinking I was gonna find the man of my dreams, thinking I was gonna fall in love with someone, you know? And that just never happened, because these men weren't there for that. These men were there because I wanted to have a transgender experience. And a lot of those men, they compartmentalize it, and they don't really want you in any other space in their life. You know, they don't really want you to be the girl they see at the bar. They don't really want you to be the girl that they take to the movies, or the girl that they take to dinner. They want you to be the girl who they have sex with and fulfill their little kink on the side. You know, that's who they want. And I know that I know that I'm privileged, and I know that passing gives me the privilege for men to feel more comfortable taking me out and things like that. I do understand that, but I do wonder to some degree if those girls also said, hey, I deserve to be treated with respect. Because the way these girls act around these guys is like they are just the cream of the crop. And they're not. They're not. You know, again, like a lot of these guys are married, cheating, you know, doing all types of shady shit. They would never, like, it's weird because like, and I'm saying that because I've connected with like 3 different dudes from these parties, you know, recently. And every last one of them, when I say, hey, we should get a drink sometime, it's just like, you know, they don't want to do it because they're discreet, you know? And for me, it's interesting because I have a lot of confidence in what I look like. I have a lot of confidence in my passing ability or whatever, that I know that it's kind of irrational for them to think that they're gonna take me out on a date and everyone's gonna be looking at them, you know, because they're with a trans person. Like, that's not a real fear, but it's real to them, you know? It's real to them. And that makes it really kind of frustrating for me. You know, so I'm in this weird sort of space where being in the places that I socialize, inherently, you know, I'm gonna meet a lot of people who find me attractive, who do think I'm interesting, who do, you know, probably want to pursue something with me that don't know that I'm transgender, but have to like work themselves up to accepting that I'm trans. You're right. So the people who are willing to give me the sort of treatment that I deserve and that I kind of demand, those are people that I'm going to have to work through towards helping accept me. And if there's one thing I would hope you guys have picked up through in these videos is that I do not believe in convincing somebody that I'm worth it. I'm super allergic to that. Sorry, you know, super allergic to it. Can't do it. Didn't get the vaccine. Not gonna do that, you know. I don't want to put up with that, you know. I don't believe in trying to convince somebody that I'm worth it. So it's that weird thing I have to do when I'm in those spaces. But then on the flip side, if I'm with these men who like trans women, generally speaking, they're gonna be discreet. They're gonna be afraid of people knowing that they like a trans person, you know. I mean, in reality, you know, the only real fear someone has to have with going out with me in terms of me getting clocked is that I'm a relatively well-known trans blogger. You know, that's truly the only fear. That's like genuinely the only real thing they would have to be nervous about is like someone recognizing me. But I wouldn't want to date somebody like that. I wouldn't want to date somebody who was like worried about people not liking my blog. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. I would rather not. But yeah, I wanted to share that with you guys because it's put me in a really weird situation because I don't want to date or be around people I gotta convince. I'm allergic to it, don't want to do it. At the same time, dating men who do like trans women, it presents a whole list of issues that I don't even want to deal with anymore, you know? And you know, to be fair, I'm kind of over dating. I made a mistake of undeleting my OkCupid page. It's been nothing but drama. And so now it's deleted and probably for good. So yeah. Anyway, I really would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. I know that sometimes when I talk about passing, I talk about that, it's not a narrative that a lot of people can identify with, but this is like a weird place that I'm in life. And I don't know. I would really like to know what you guys think, because to be clear, when I meet somebody, I don't initially tell them that I'm trans. Even when I know someone is interested in me, I don't initially tell them that I'm trans. When I establish a mutual thing, that's generally when I tell them that I'm transgender, you know? And another layer that I didn't mention is that going into these trans spaces, it was also weird because people didn't, a lot of men thought I was just a cis girl that was hanging out at the trans club. And because of that, they weren't very interested in me. That was the one thing I saw so clearly this time around was that these men are there for trans women, okay? They aren't even really that interested in like the few, because there are sometimes a few cis girls in that space. They want a trans girl. And so it was that weird sort of feeling of feeling almost a little invisible in the space that's supposed to be for trans people. And then at the same time over here in the spaces I generally, you know, populate, feeling like I'm this complex thing that has to be explained and then accepted, you know? And I don't really like either of these these feelings or experiences. So I'm curious if anyone has had to, you know, navigate around this. This is truly one of those conversations where I would really just love to read the comments on this, because there have to be other people who have been in my situation. You know, where I am now in life, it's like, I just can't justify being in those sorts of spaces, to be honest. I feel like an intruder in most queer spaces. We can do a whole video about that at another point, but yeah, so I don't populate them very frequently, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Anyway, I need to go. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you sticking through to the end. Right now, you guys are seeing 2 awesome True Tea videos that you can watch after this video. If you want to stick on this channel and keep watching True Tea, you know, we talk about a lot of fun and interesting and weird things here. And always remember that you guys can always leave, you know, a suggestion for a topic. If you guys have a suggestion, I do listen sometimes. So yeah, I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.